We were just getting started on another day of hard work. I started digging. Right over here, suddenly, among the stones, about half a meter away from me, I noticed a small, round object. I went over to it, and it was a small piece of clay. I picked it up carefully, and I put it in the palm of my hand. Right away, I noticed, across its center, letters in ancient Hebrew script, and the three letters were clearly visible: Shin, Lamed, and Mem. At the beginning of the 6th century BCE, Jehoiakim, king of Judah, attempts to rebel against the Babylonian Empire and brings upon himself the furious response of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar takes control of Jerusalem and exiles the new king of Judah, Jehoiakim's son, Jehoiachin, with all his ministers to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar appoints a weak person to the throne, Jehoiakim's brother, Zedekiah. But even now, despite the hard blow it has suffered, Jerusalem is not calm. False prophets roam the streets and persuade the people that liberation from the Babylonian tyranny is coming soon. Neighboring Egypt encourages King Zedekiah to rebel against the Babylonians again and even promises him military assistance. The only person who opposes the calls to rebel is the prophet Jeremiah, who warns, "Bring your necks under the yoke of the king of Babylon and serve him and his people and live. Why should you and your people die by the sword, by famine, and by plague, as the Lord has spoken against the nation that will not serve the king of Babylon?" Zedekiah does not listen to Jeremiah. He is swept up in the tumult, and under pressure from his ministers, he rebels against Babylonian rule. On the 10th day of Tevet, in the year 588 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar positions his huge army outside the walls of Jerusalem and besieges the city. And then, there's a surprising development. The reinforcements promised by Egypt arrive. The Babylonian siege is broken. The people of Jerusalem rejoice in the streets. Jerusalem is saved. Only Jeremiah remains somber and sullen. He knows the salvation is only temporary. Behold, Pharaoh's army, which has come forth to help you, shall return to Egypt, to their own land, and the Chaldeans shall come back and fight against this city, and take it, and burn it with fire. Jeremiah's insistence on prophesying doom, even when the danger has passed, greatly enrages the king's officials. As soon as Jeremiah leaves the city, they arrest him on charges of desertion. "You are deserting to the Chaldeans," they accuse him, and then they throw him into a pit. Only a few meters above Jeremiah's head, the inhabitants of the city realized that their joy over the deliverance of Jerusalem was premature. The Babylonian army returns and again attacks the city with tens of thousands of soldiers. Everyone now realizes that Jeremiah was right. Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. Broken and frustrated, Jeremiah understands that the rulers are deaf to his calls and that he cannot prevent the imminent destruction. The only thing that he can do is to attempt to save the lives of all those who are willing to listen. From within the pit, he calls out, "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, he who abides in the city will die by the sword, and by famine, and by plague. But he who goes out and goes over to the Chaldeans, who besiege you, will live." The king's ministers are furious. In their eyes, this is sheer treason. The ministers of King Zedekiah, Jehucal, son of Shelemiah, Gedaliah, son of Pashhur, and others convene here in the government compound and vehemently demand that the king execute the prophet Jeremiah. "Let this man be put to death, for he is thus weakening the hands of the men of war who remain in this city and the hands of all the people." Jeremiah is again thrown into a deep pit, but this time the pit is full of quicksand and Jeremiah sinks to his neck. At the very last moment, one of the king's servants rescues Jeremiah from the pit. He improvises a lifeline and pulls Jeremiah out. Jeremiah's life is saved, but he will remain imprisoned in the court dungeon, frustrated and hurt until the end of the war. His extraordinary efforts to change the fate of his people have been to no avail. Jerusalem remains isolated and surrounded by enemies, deeply entrenched in the mud. After the seal was cleaned, it became apparent that the name on it was Jehucal, son of Shelemiah, one of the ministers of King Zedekiah who demanded the death penalty of Jeremiah. To hold this tiny seal, measuring only 1 square centimeter from 2,600 years ago. To open the Bible to Jeremiah 37 and 38, and to see Jehucal, son of Shelemiah, son of Shuvi, and Jehucal, son of Shelemiah. It's the same person. One of the few cases where one can really hold the Bible open with one hand and an archaeological find in the other and see that they are talking about the same person. It's an amazing, moving experience. It's a once-in-a-lifetime discovery.